Agud Moed Raboisai. Lili Nishmasi Mi Merosir Mordechai live from a hotel in Chicago. Chol Moed Erev Shabbos, or whenever you're watching this, Motzi Shabbos, after Yontif. It's all good. In case you're watching it tomorrow, so we have for you a reminder for Spheres Ta'imer. I'm making a macha on the line that it says over here. It's not about the sphere, it's about the yomi. It is about the sphere. It's also about the yomi. We'll have to change that eventually. Rabbi Isai, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I thought this was a very nice email, although it mentions the same thing over, but it's kedai for this part. Chag Sameach, I've been meaning to write to you for a long time. I've been part of your daf shir since Moed and I went to the Shabbaton in Stamford, Connecticut, with one of my boys. Now listen to this. This is incredible. My wife and kids still remind me whenever we squeeze into our little car that I sold her car. We had two cars, and I convinced my wife that we only really need one, so I sold my wife's car so we could pay for the Shabbaton. Do you hear what's going on here? This individual sold his car so he could pay for the Shabbaton. My son and I had a great time. So there's a number of things I want to point out here. So first of all, it's an unbelievable thing. You sell your car, so you go to the Shabbaton. But the thing is, he sold his wife's car so that he could go to the Shabbaton. And he and his son went to the Shabbaton, not even his wife. So it's still an incredible thing. I'm very, very proud of you. That's the way to do it, as we'll see in today's sugya. If you have a choice to sell your car, your wife's car, you're supposed to sell your wife's car, let her stay at home. Mamish before Gemara, this is what we're talking about. To be careful with the covet of your wife, a whole thing, a whole sugya. Givaldik, unbelievable. Bruce, I'm very, very, very proud of you. No, I am. I like him a lot. Bruce Kessler from Bergenfield, New Jersey. The reason why I'm finally writing today is because after watching your Bava Metzia, Num Vav Daf Shir, I knew I couldn't push it off anymore. Towards the end of the Shir, you got emotional because of your appreciation that Hashem gave you the ability to prepare and give two Shirim Erev Pesach. I happen to be a very emotional person, and one of the things I love about your Shir is how you connect with your Talmidim in so many different ways. When you cry, I cry. When you laugh, I laugh. Another thing that was very negat to today's sugi is dvarim, not to hurt somebody's feeling and not to embarrass somebody in public. So I'm not sure if I was Mekayim both of those things by making fun of Bruce Kessler in front of 20,000 people. But I hope he knows my humor, and we're moving on. Thank you for all you and your team at MDY'er do to help us learn the daf. I want to wish you and your family Chag Sameach, your Talmud, Bruce Kessler. No, it really is a very special, to me it's a very special email. Guy sells his car to do a Davar Ruchni. I don't know if Mark, are we able to do volume over here? Good Moed Rebelli. It was great being at your first live share last week in America from Chicago. Attached video are the 5 Zuri children whose motherly Ora Tova Bas Racham died in a horrific car accident 2 years ago. I know all about the accident. There was a terrible, terrible tragedy. If you remember, in Colorado, there was a couple going skiing and they got into a crazy accident. Their father, Joel, is an MDY'er member. Steve, Seychelles, Baltimore. Here we go.
Who is our favorite Daf Yomi Magid Shir?
Eli Stefansky!
Yeah, perfect.
One thing you can see that they're very well behaved. The Shmaka kids. HaKadosh Baruch should give them a great, great life. And good Yontif to you guys. This is the famous car. Somebody sent it to me again. I keep on getting it over and over because it is a special car. It says Join MDY, which is a call for action on a license plate. Plus it has the magnets, so it's givaldik. I believe it was a chasam back in the day when we got it, probably like a year ago. By Ari Spitzler, huge mazel tov to Yosef Dahari from Manchester on the birth of his baby girl. Huge mazel tov. Yosef Dahari is one of the few who takes the initiative into his own hand, goes out and brings people, he organizes all these different things in Manchester, from the Melava Malkas and the Siyumim, etc., etc. So tremendous mazel tov to Yosef Dahari. Rabbi Isai, the Masechta is sponsored by Anonymous for the safe and speedy return of all the hostages. Paras HaChodesh Li'nishma Zechrya Ben Moshe Li'nishma Chayo Bas Yosef. Paras HaChodesh, last day, by Ahron Fraiman. It should be zechus Eli. Thank you so much for continuous siyadta dishmaya and teaching Torah to Klal Yisroel. Parnas HaChodesh, Yosef Ben Chaya Sara for the zchusim that come from supporting limud Torah. Parnas HaChodesh, Binyomin Rosenfeld for hatzlacha in business and all my endeavours. Parnas HaYoim, Pernasa, ולהצלחה בשפע, ולזיווג for Moshe Ben Freda Leah, Amen. Parnas HaYoim, Kidnovations LLC, in honor of Mark Aschkenasy, the one and only Mark Aschkenasy, who I have to say this over and over. On Erev Shabbos is behind the scenes. He's doing 2 shiurim today. He doesn't get any of the glitz and the covet and everything else that a MDY'er gets. He's behind the scenes doing the shiur without saying a word. Whenever I ask him, I say, can we do the shiur now? Yes, I'll be ready. Whenever it is. So only HaKadosh Baruch Hu could pay you for your chesed. And what does he say? Kidnovations. Mark Aschkenasy, while he was out with his family, took the time to help out another MDY'er with a medical emergency. And as zchus v'estebas Tova Liba and Daniel Mordechai ben Tova Liba to find the zivugim quickly. There's a person who's looking out for other people to find zivugim for other people. Mark, I guess your family's already used to this. You go out, you're on a chalamoy trip with your family, you drop them, you do the medical thing, you're on a chalamoy trip with your family, you drop them, you do the shiur. Erev Pesach, you did 2 shiurim, unbelievable. The Art of the Mountain, anonymous to the zchus for an easy childbirth for his daughter and healthy baby. Rabbi saying we have one of the most famous dapim in Shas, one of the most famous stories that ever happened in Shas. And a number of times we go back to the story of Tanur Shalachnoi, the famous story where Rebbe Eliezer was in a fight, argument in halacha with Chachamim, although he was right halachically, but Chachamim were right because they're the majority, and they put him into Chayrim, and he was in Chayrim for the rest of his life. And the Gemara calls him a Shamta, he's a Nidui. But the Gemara says when the person that's a Nidui is referring to Rebbe Eliezer, sometimes just says it like with one word, I believe. A number of times we go back to this story. It's in Hazav, in Bava Metzia, Daf Yomi, Amud Beis, very, very famous story. And there are many lessons that we can learn from that story, and also the halachas of Oinoas Dvarim, of insulting your friend. I received an email, or what was it? Maybe a WhatsApp from somebody. From Fischl, that a new person, somebody that joined MDY recently said, I never knew that you can't go into a store and just ask them for prices and walk out. We're learning things. We're learning practical halacha l'maisa. Be'ez Hashem, in 2-3 days. Actually, we're starting Ezer Neshech in 2 days, but it gets real interesting in 4 days from now. First 2 days are kind of easy, but halacha l'maisa in business, etc. We're holding the last line on the bottom of Nun Ches Amud Beis. Omar Rabba Barachana, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, and Neimer Rabbi Yochanan. Tab of Nun Ches Amud Aleph. Noach le'ladam sheyavay al sofek eshesish v'al yabim nechaveru berabim. A person prefers to be over on eshesish and not to embarrass his friend in public. Reminds me of a story. I don't even know if I should say. I was once in a hotel. I mentioned this a number of times with a lot of Hasidim there, and there were more Hasidim that went off the derech. They weren't really on the derech, and their wives weren't dressed very tznius, and they were doing like a kumzitz on Friday night, and the women came to the table. There's a lot of men there, and so men started saying, "Hey, why are your wives here?" So they said, you're going to be mal b'pnei chaveru b'rabim. It's better not to be mal b'pnei chaveru b'rabim than to be over on arayis. They started quoting this Gemara over here. Nobody wanted to hear about it. It almost went physical. It's better. Here's a picture that Yoshi did. In other words, and here's the continuation. Just look at the shaygitz. He's a efes v'ayin kenegdi, ayin v'efes kenegdi. Kitzer, he's a big shaygitz. But you know what? The big shaygitz doesn't embarrass other people, and you're embarrassing somebody with Rabbi. How do you know this halacha? You see from Rabbi's drasha, the Darash Rabbi. So this is the famous story with David HaMelech. David HaMelech married Bathsheba. It's a complicated story, and whoever says that David sinned is only making a mistake. But what happened was David HaMelech wanted to marry Bathsheba, but she was still married to Uriah, so David HaMelech sent Uriah out to war. And similar today, unfortunately, also we have a very similar thing that Chaylim, when they go out to war, they leave a get for their wife. I saw specifically even in the Korean War, American soldiers, Jewish soldiers left gittim for the wives, so there's no question of aguna. The way it works retroactive. They're not going to divorce the wife today, but if something happens, if they get killed, so the divorce retroactive, something like that. So there was a get that was given that if Uriah dies, his wife was divorced retroactively. David HaMelech married her before Uriah died, but once he died retroactively, it became clear that she was a divorcee. So David HaMelech says, Ubitzali. Bitzali is a lashon of rib, my tzela, my wife, right? Because Chava Imenu was taken from the tzela, which is not really the rib, it means the bone, the tailbone. Okay. Samchu v'nesafu. They were very joyous. They gathered. Karu v'loy dimu. What does that mean? V'loy dam. Omar David l'bnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rebbeinu Shalom. Golui v'yidua lefenecha. You know, Hashem, Shim hayu mikorin b'sari lo yahayu dami shoises la'aretz. I don't have any blood running through my veins from all the busha and embarrassment that these people have caused me. As we said yesterday, when a person is embarrassed, so his face flushes his blood, but then it drains out. It's an expression of, look at the busha, how much busha they caused me. Talking about David HaMelech, one of the greatest people that ever lived. I always like to ask people, I used to ask this a lot, if you could meet two people from history, who would they be? And a lot of people say they want to meet David HaMelech. Just a fascinating figure in Yiddishkeit. He wrote Tehillim. He was always the underdog. Nobody believed in him. He's the short redhead, the one that nobody liked. And now finally he's the king, and they're putting him down again. They're saying, "Oh, he was over an Ishish." Listen to this. David HaMelech says, these Talmidei Chacham are learning the hardest things that you could possibly learn, Negoim and Oyalos. The good news for Daf Yomi is that we don't learn it. It's not part of the Daf Yomi, it's in the Mishnayos. Oimrimli David, so they come to me in a tricky way, in a sarcastic way. They come to me and they say, Haba Ishish Misasibema. Somebody who was over an Ishish, what death penalty does he get? Vani Oimer Lem, and I answer to them, they get chenek. As we mentioned yesterday, twice is the last line on Amud Beis. The last two lines are the tshuva, my eldest, the kol davar. When you do tshuva, it helps even for Eishes Ish. They have a chelik lo'elam haba. I say this with trepidation, with being very fearful, because unfortunately, the way I was born with a very, very weak filter, and I have an audience, and many times I snap, sort of. People do things, or, a guy leaves his phone on and it rings 4 times in a row, and I'll say something to him in public. I could be over on this. It's very, very, very severe. You embarrass your friend in public, you don't have a portion of Olam Haba. It's not a joke. Omarav, Vamri lo Omer of Chano bar Bizna Omer Rishim Chasido, Vamri lo Omer Rishim Rishim Baychoi. Rebbe said in the name of Rishim Baychoi, Noyach lo Adam Shiabla Atzmoi L'Kivshaneish. A person would prefer to jump into a fiery flame, V'ayal b'mpnei chaveru berabim, and not to embarrass your friend once in public. Minallah, B'tamar. T'chsiv hi mutzeis v'hi sholcha el chamiyah. So I'm going to say this again. I want to ask people tonight if they know the story about Yehuda and Tamar, because there's a couple of points that are so simple, yet I'm not sure that everybody's familiar with the points. What exactly happened with Yehuda and Tamar? Why did she want to be with Yehuda? And why did Yehuda say that she must die? And then, she doesn't have to die. What happened? Very, very simple. Tamar was a Yavama. She died, and her husband her husband died and didn't leave any children, and therefore she has a chiyuv to marry her brother-in-law. But in the time before the Torah was given, it's not just the brother-in-law; it's also the father-in-law. It's anybody related. So therefore, when she couldn't marry Sheila, she decided she must marry her father-in-law Yehuda. So she pretended that she was a Zaina and she was with Yehuda. Yehuda didn't know that he was with her. He thought that he was with a Zaina. But when they found out that she's pregnant, a Yavama is not allowed to marry outside, only to her Yavam, only to her brother-in-law, to her father-in-law, but not to a stranger. So when they found out that she's pregnant, they said, oh, she's Chayiv Misa. And Yehuda agreed with that. When Yehuda found out that it's from him, so she's not Chayiv Misa. That Nekuda, I think, is very important. That the Yibum was extended to family members before Matan Torah. He mutzeis, so it's a lashon also of mutzeis, is she went out to be killed, but also he mutzeis, she was lit on fire. V'yisholchal chamia. And the Targum in Avim says literally she was lit on fire. She's put into the kivshan aish, but she wouldn't burn like Chanayim Shal Vazariah. You shouldn't say not nice things to your friend. The Chavetz Chaim Shmiras HaLashon says, I used to use this a lot. I don't know if it's the right thing. The Chavetz Chaim warns about using this pasuk, and he says, I'm going to tell you a heter now for Lashon Hara. I don't want to tell it to you because there are going to be people that are going to be using it in the wrong way. But I have to tell you because it's Torah, and the limud I have to say Torah, but it's like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's Torah. On the other hand, people are going to misuse it. And he finishes off and he says, "Tzadikim yelchu bam." The tzadikim will go with it in the right way. Ve'upoishim, and those who sin, yikash lomam, they'll stumble on it. What's the heter? The heter is that when somebody doesn't act al pi Torah, he doesn't do the Torah mitzvahs, then you're not mechuyev to respect him with a noaz dvar. You could insult him, and you could talk lashon hara about it. What exactly that person is, okay? That we have to figure out. Chal Shabbos or this, that, but this big isser of a noaz dvarim and lashon hara was said to somebody that's amisoi, that's im she'itcha b'Torah u'b'mitzvahs. A person who's with you with Torah and mitzvahs. A person has to be very careful from insulting his wife and hurting her feelings because her tears are very close, they're easy to come. So her being insulted is close by, and therefore if she cries, Hashem will listen to her, and it's very dangerous. But it doesn't mean just your wife. Any woman, any sensitive person who cries easily is very dangerous. But certainly your wife. So this gives us another thought, that before you hurt your wife's feelings, before you insult your wife, remember this Gemara. A person should always be careful with hurting his wife. Since it's easy for her to cry, so it's easier to be over on oinaz dvar. Omar Rebbe Lazar. From the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, ninalu shari tefillah. The gates of davening were locked. Shenemar gamki ezak, even if I'll scream eshaveya, sosam tefillah, Hashem closes down our tefillah. Vavapisha shari tefillah ninalu. Nevertheless, even though the gates of tefillah were closed, locked, shari demois loy ninalu, but the gates of tears loy ninalu. Shenemar shima tefillah Hashem. Hashem, listen to my tefillah. V'shavasi hazina, and my cry or my begging, you shall listen to. El demasti, into my tears. Al techarash, don't turn a deaf ear to. back in the Haim, they wanted to make a Chanukas Habayis by the Sar Shalom of bells, the bells of Beis Medrash, but it didn't have the Znashim ready yet. They figured, okay, look, 90% of it is built, let's just do Chanukas Habayis. And the Rebbe said no. The Rebbe said, we don't have Shari Tefillah anymore. The gates of Tefillah are closed. So what do we have left? The gates of crying. Who cries the most? Women. They daven with tears. So we really need the Ezra Snashim. Let's wait for the Ezra Snashim to be finished, then we'll do Chanukas Habayis. So on the one hand, we have a contradiction here. On the one hand, it says, if you listen to your wife, if you take her advice, you fall into Gehenna. Shenemar, rak lo yehoyo ka'achav. This is very interesting. Rak lo yehoyo ka'achav. Who's Achav? The biggest Russia, the biggest king Russia that ever lived. So the Yerushalmi tells us that Levi darshaned for 6 months this part of the pasuk. And after 6 months, he had a dream. Achav came to him in a dream and said, what are you doing? Why are you stuck on this part of the pasuk? Go to the end of the pasuk. In our Gemara as well, it's interesting. Rak lo Achav v'goymer. V'goymer means you must finish the pasuk. So let me see if I can finish the pasuk for you. Here we go. Rak lo Achav asher ismaker lasis hara bein Hashem. He did the bad in front of Hashem. Asher yisato oisoy. His wife Izevel steered him to do the wrong. In other words, you see that if you take the advice of your wife, you'll be like Achav. It could bring bad things. But this doesn't work well. People say, if your wife is short, as such, you should bend over and whisper to her. In other words, take her advice. Here, let's see what he has to say. Oh, Lichi, do you think I should take out the garbage and change my socks? He's about to get such a zetz. Okay, so ask her advice. Should I take out the garbage? Not take out the garbage. You should ask the advice. So the Gemara when you're asking things about the house, great. You're asking things in the world, you shouldn't ask her. When it comes to things that are important for Klapi Shmaya, like learning and davening, that sort of thing, don't ask her. When it comes to anything else in the world, then you should ask your wife for advice. Why? Because a guy learns in yeshiva, he knows more Torah than his wife, so you shouldn't be asking his wife about Torah things. Omar Avchizda, Kol HaSha'arim Ninalim, or ninalu chutz mishari oina. Says Rav Chizda, the gates of people who cry because they were insulted and hurt, that Hashem listens to. Be careful. So if somebody screams to Hashem because he was hurt, Hashem will listen to him. Hashem is on a wall that's plumb, and he has in his hand a plumb line. Let's see if I have a plumb line. I had it be here before. Oh, actually I have two of them. One in blue and one in metal. They're hard to see, but bottom line is it's a weight that has a string attached to the top. And when you hang it from somewhere, because of the weight, it's going to make the string pull straight. And that's how you can build a straight wall based on the string. You can see in the right picture, both pictures, they're actually using a tape measure to the string, and you just keep on going up and up, and that's how you know if your wall is plumb and straight. So it says that Hashem is holding the tool. In other words, He Himself is there, as the Gemara is going to explain now. Baruch Hu uses a messenger to take avenge for different sins. Chutz ma'ina. When it comes to insulting somebody, then Hashem takes revenge Himself. Shenemar uveyodei anoch. Hashem is with the tool. There's a wall, there's a mechitza, so to speak. It's all kaviyach. In order to protect people, the malachim, they stand in the way of the Haver in Hashem. They kind of like mix it up, so to speak, so that Hashem doesn't see it right away. There's such a thing. Hashem doesn't take revenge right away. Besides 3 aveiros that Hashem sees right through all walls, there's no mechitzas. Shloisha eina pargud ninal b'fneihem. Which ones? Or no, insulting somebody, hurting somebody with words. Begazel, stealing. V'avid zara. Oina d'chsiv uviyoli anoch. Here, Hashem Himself with the tool. Gazel d'chsiv chomas v'shoidi shoma bo al ponai tomen. I'll hear it right away on my face. Avid zara d'chsiv ha'om ha'machisim oisi al ponai tomen. The people that do Avodah Zarah, then the pasuk talks about the Zarah, they anger me. You have to be careful to have enough food in the house. Today they say that the number one fight by couples is over money. That's like, I think, the number one thing. This is something similar. Food, money. In those days, they didn't have that much cash. It wasn't about cash. It was about food, survival. There's no the fighting happens, but it usually happens because of food. When there's no more barley in the jar, so then you knock, and out comes the fight in the house. A person should always be very careful to have enough food, wheat. Klal Yisroel was considered poor because of their dealings with wheat. It's talking about Midyon. They became very poor because of Midyon and the wheat that they were planting. A person should always be careful in the honor of his wife. The Ramah says, interesting, talking about Pesach now. So Ramah says that on Pesach night, the mitzvah of leaning over Haseva is for men. Forgot to mention, I'll mention it now, just in case I forget by next year. But remember that the ikr mitzvah of a seva is to lean the head on something. A lot of people, they lean the shoulder and their head is like, no, it's the head. And that if you're not makbid on that, it's unfortunate that I forgot to mention it before Pesach, but it's better later than never. According to, I think the Ramah, you're not yoytza haseva if your head is not on something. Okay. So the Ramah says that b'zman hazeh, women are chayiv in a seva. Why? Because they're chashav. So Kidnovations LLC says, what do you mean they're chashav? Where do you see that women are more chashav than they were 1,000 years ago? So he says because of the cherem de Rabbeinu Gershon. So actually, it is 1,000 years ago. Rabbeinu Gershon instituted that you cannot divorce your wife forcefully, and you can't marry 2 women. So they gave women chashivos, extra chashivos, and therefore they should do haseva like a queen. A wife causes the bracha in the house. So you have to respect that. You have to give that extra respect. If you want bracha in your house, respect your wife. Paroi gave Avram because of Sarah. Rava advised the city, if you want to become rich, give honor to your wives. This is true. They should become wealthy. You want to become wealthy? Give honor to your wife. So now we go into the very, very famous story of Tanur Shel Achnoi. This is a continuation of the sugya. It fits right into our sugya because we are dealing with dvarim, hurting a person. And when you hurt a person, even if you're doing l'shem shamayim, as Reb Chaim Shmulevitz always says, you're doing l'shem shamayim. Reb Gamliel did it l'shem shamayim. He said, why did he die? He died because at the end of the day, as dvarim bites. You got to be careful, super, super, super careful with as dvarim. So, Over here is the reason why Rebbe Eliezer, unfortunately for the rest of his life, was in Nidui, Shamto. This is the famous story of Tanur Shel Achnoi. Nanos, Chatochoi Chuliois. So I sent this to Yoshi. I said, give me a picture of an oven that looks similar to this game. The reason is because each one of these rings represents a piece of earthenware and becomes narrower and narrower as it climbs up. So give me an oven that looks like this, and this is what he gave me. I think it's beautiful. You put the pot in the bottom, and it becomes narrow. But here's what's beautiful. Take a look. You see that? In between each ring, there's cement made out of sand. And here we have a machlokes. If this oven is considered earthenware, so then it's mekabel tumah. Let's say a dead rat touches the oven, so anything within inside the ear space of the oven, not touching the oven, but inside the ear space of the oven becomes tummy. But if we don't consider this oven earthenware, we consider dirt. Look, it's equally dirt and earthenware. So what do we consider it? If it's a piece of dirt, it's clay galalim, it's clay ofar, clay adama. It's a kli, it's a vessel made out of dirt, made out of feces from a cow, whatever. It's not mekabel tumah. Rebbe Eliezer is of the opinion that it's not mekabel tumah. We consider it dirt, and therefore any fruit that touched it in it, whatever, meat, not tummy. Chacham say is tummy. That was their argument. As we'll see, Rebbe Eliezer was right. L'chayr, Rebbe Eliezer was right. But Chachamim are right. Why? Because they're the majority. A majority always wins, even if the other person is right. Now, some 2 lines from the bottom. You cut down earthenware to rings, and you put dirt between the rings. Rebbe Eliezer MDY'er, Rebbe Eliezer says it's considered earthenware, not earthenware, dirtware. The Chachamim say it's considered earthenware. V'zeu Tanur Shel Achnoi. And this, Rabbi Yisai, is the famous Tanur Shel Achnoi. Kidnovations LLC, in honor of my uncle, Rabbi Ahron Fraiman, and as zchus for Akiva Simcha Ben Moed, who's with us for Yosef. Officials, mitzvah motivators, in honor of the limud for sponsoring Sfarim for the daily and atomic learning, and by the Gewurzman brothers for the yard sites of our grandfathers, Achaver Moshe Ben Yerachmiel Shalom, and a Rav Eliezer Moshe Ben Reb Shema Zatzal. My Achnoi, why is it called an oven of Achnoi? What does Achnoi mean? Omar Rav Yidom Shmuel Shekifu Dvorim Ka'achno Zuvitimu. Here's an Achno. Says Rashi, it's a snake that puts its tail into its mouth. Thank you, Mark. It's a circle. That Chachamim, Chachamim came and circled him with questions about what he had to say, and they said, "You are wrong, we are right." It's Tommy. Tana says the Gemara, Heishiv Rebbe Yehuda. Sorry, Heishiv Rebbe Eliezer called Tshuvi Shabbat. He answered. Rebbe Eliezer told him everything, all his questions, answers, all his proofs in the world. Like Kidnovations, and they didn't accept it from him. And he says to them, "This is the very, very famous story. If the Allah is like me, I want this boxer tree to prove that I am right. Nekar, it was uprooted. It flew 100 amma, 200 feet in another direction. Some say 800 feet. We are not convinced just because a tree was uprooted, we're not going to prove anything from that. So he says, okay, you don't agree with that. Why don't you agree with that? Because maybe the Chorov was uprooted because of the covet of Rebbe Eliezer, not because he was right in halacha. So perhaps Amas Hamayim, the river will prove that I'm right. Amas Hamayim yechichu. Chazru Amas Hamayim lechareim. In fact, the river started flowing in the opposite direction. The Maisa Bereshis changed over here. Everything is showing that Rebbe Eliezer is right. Chachamim are not budging. Omerloi ei meviim rayo me'amas hamayim. Cannot bring any proof from the flow of water. Chazav Amalem. Im halacha kemoisi kosli beis hamedrash yichichu. The walls of the Beis Hamedrash should prove hitu kosli beis hamedrash lipod. So the walls started falling down. Gar ben Rabbi Shua yelled at the walls. Omar lem im tamid chacham menaskim zezev halacha. When the tamid chacham are fighting in halacha, atem ativchem. What right do you have to interfere and mix in? Who are you, b'chlal, to decide what's what? So the walls did not fall because of Rabbi Shua. But they didn't go back to where they were supposed to go because of the covenant of Rabbi Eliezer. If you go to that place today, you'll see that the walls are like halfway in between falling. So he said, you know what? You don't trust me from the trees and the water and the walls. I'll prove it min hashamayim, straight out of heaven. Yotza Baskov Amro, Malochem Eitzel Rebbe Eliezer, Shalocha Kemoise B'chol Mokai. Why are you fighting with Rebbe Eliezer? The halacha is like Rebbe Eliezer everywhere in Shas. Omar Rebbe Shua Raglo, Omar Rebbe Shua stood up on his feet and he said, Loi b'shamayim. Torah is not in heaven. You have no right to decide and send out your messages from heaven. What does it mean? You, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, gave the Torah to Klal Yisroel. You gave it to human beings. We cannot listen to heavenly voices. You ready? In your Torah, you said, we have a rule that when we don't know what the halacha is, and when we have a fight in learning, we go by the majority. Yes, Rebbe Eliezer is right. Perhaps you are right that he's right, but we are the ones that decide in this world what Torah is. It's interesting. I had an argument on this Pesach with somebody that doesn't really believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. You, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, said that Torah Sheba'al Peh works. In other words, this is a rule that we, in the generations, I don't know in our generation so much, but yes, when the Gedolim get together and they decide a certain halacha, that is the halacha. Even if Hashem doesn't agree to that halacha, it becomes halacha because Hashem said that the halacha should go by the majority. So he has to agree with his own rule. And that's why Ashkechei Rebbe Nosson Lelio, Rebbe Nosson bumped into Eliyahu Hanavi. Omar Lei, my Oved Kushu Brichu Ba'ishato. What did Hashem do at that moment when Rabbi Yeshua said we don't listen to the Baskal? Omar Lei Kochayich. Hashem was happy. V'Omar, he was smiling and he said, Nitzchuni Bonai, Nitzchuni Bonai. My children, you beat me with my own rule. The rule of Achirabim Lahatois beat me. I think Reb Ber says, Pshat in Nitzchuni Bonai, that although the Maisa Bereshis showed otherwise, the water flowing in one direction it comes from Hashem saying that it should flow in that direction when He created the world, and Rebbe Eliezer uprooted that to prove himself. The tree flew, the walls are moving. But halacha stands. Achirabim lahatois is greater and stronger than all those moifsim. Nitzchuni bonai. Omru. That very day, everything that touched that oven, the Rebbe Eliezer said is tar. They took it and burnt it to show that the halacha is that it's tamei. V'nimnu olav, and they made a vote, and they said uverchu, and they blessed him. And it's Loshin Saginar, it means they put him in Nidui. He was in Nidui in Shamta. You can't have any dealings with him. He can't come to a shul. You don't talk to him. You sit 4 amas away from him. V'amru, and they said, who's going to Notify Rabbi Eliezer that he's in Cherem. He's being stubborn. He doesn't want to say that Allah is like Chachamim. Rabbi Kiva says, I shall go, because perhaps somebody that's not proper will go, and he'll say, oh, Chacham put you in Cherem. He'll be so upset, the world will be destroyed. Rabbi Kiva says, what did he do? He went, he wore black clothes, and he covered his head in black. Like you do for someone that's in Nilu. You sit 4 hours away from him. Omar Rabbi Eliezer says, Akiva, ma yoim yom. What are you doing here? What's different today? Why are you dressed like this? Omar Loy, Rebbe, it seems to me like your friends are distancing themselves from you. Says the Gemara, he ripped his clothing like you do at a levaya. He took off his shoes like you do at a levaya. Like you do at a levaya. You sit on the ground. Of the Moed, he started crying. And here again, once again, we see this idea of tears, how powerful tears are. Second, he started crying. The entire world, all produce of olives, wheat, and barley, a third, went five. If a woman was baking bread, it's spoiled. Tana. A terrible thing happened that day. Greater than that. Wherever Rebbe Lezer poked his eyes, looked at me, Nisraf, burnt. Reminds me of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai when he came out of the cave. Burnt. Gamliel was on a ship. This is just a depiction. But there was a tremendous wave that came to bring down the ship. Omar, so Gamliel says, I think this is all because of Rebbe Eliezer. I am at fault here. That's why it's coming to kill me. Gamliel gets up on his feet, and he says, you know that I didn't put Rebbe Eliezer in Cherem. I didn't do this. I didn't fight with him for my own honor and for the honor of my father. I did it for your honor. In order that there shouldn't be any machlokes in Klal Yisroel, and because of that, noch hayom mizah. I really wanted to find the pshat. I know it's out there, and it's been bothering me. Why is that when Gamliel explained to Hashem, I didn't do it for my own honor, I did it for you, Hashem said, okay, no more waves. What Hashem didn't know, Gamliel's intent. Let's say Gamliel's intent was for his own honor. So just because he said it, then Hashem is going to forgive him. He says, not. Elamai, it wasn't for his own honor. It's for the honor of Hashem. So Hashem didn't know it's for his honor. Why does he have to tell him that? Okay, whatever the pshat is. Says the Gemara, Moed the Gemais. Now, before I say the story, I want to ask you something. What is the most geschmacke thing that ever happened to you during davening? Shachris, Monday morning. Davening, the most geschmacke thing that ever happened is when you find out that the sandik of the bris is sitting in this shul right here. Oh, why geschmack? I don't have to say tachnon. Unbelievable. What a geschmack. Or if the chassan walks in, the Ma'aseh Shaya, I just told my son, who just became bar mitzvah, I said, Chodesh Nisan, I told him during davening, I said, Chodesh Nisan, he says, why don't we say tachnon? I said, Chodesh Nisan, the whole month, we don't say tachnon. He goes, yes! You're so excited, yes! That's an excitement of a 13-year-old, of somebody that doesn't know. I saw with my own eyes a sefer. I've been in places where it says, today there's no tachnon because it's the Yortzeit of the Gestaktik Rebbe, zechroya who lived 7,000 years ago, and this and this. Nobody knows his name. It's his Yortzeit. You don't have to say tachnon. There's a whole book. It says, this today is this Rebbe, and this Baba, and this, and this. Every day is another Yortzeit. Baruch Hashem, I don't have to say tachnon. Wow! So gishmak. It's a mistake. Gemara says, Ima Shalom, there was a lady by the name of Ima Shalom. the Visu de Rebbe Eliezer, she had more yichus than Reb Chaim Kanievsky's wife. Reb Chaim Kanievsky's wife is the daughter of Rebbe Eliashiv, married to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the daughter-in-law of the Steipler, the Mechutenes to Reb Shteiman, gets more yichus than that even. She was the wife of Rebbe Eliezer and the sister, Achosid Rebbe Gamliel, she was the sister of Rebbe Gamliel. Now, there's a fight going on here between Rebbe Gamliel, her brother, and Rebbe Eliezer, her husband. Rebbe Eliezer, her husband, is a cher. Nobody can talk to him. He can't go to shul. He davens at home. From that day on, she wouldn't allow her husband Rebbe Eliezer to say Tachnun, because Tachnun is so powerful. It has so much to it. We are just shoitim amaratzim. We have no idea. Oh, geshmak. We don't have to say Tachnun today. No, it's not geshmak. We're missing out on the beautiful tefillah called Tachnun, which could kill another human being. It could kill all your enemies. If you knew that it would kill all your enemies, you'd say it. I'll say it so. Halavai should die. Okay, chas v'shalom. It's a powerful tefillah. She wouldn't allow it. It was Rosh Chodesh. Now there's a difference between a full month, a month of 29, a month of 30 days. When do you make Rosh Chodesh? That month happened to be a full month. So you make Rosh Chodesh on the 31st day. She thought that today's Rosh Chodesh. She made a mistake. Rosh Chodesh was tomorrow. So she thought her husband's not going to say Tachnun. So she didn't care. She walked away. And that was a boo-boo, because her husband said Tachnun, Rebbe Eliezer said Tachnun, and Rebbe Gamliel died on the spot. Or, you could have some say, I'm sorry, let's just read it. She got confused between a full month and a month of 29 days versus 30 days. She thought that Rosh Chodesh is today, because it's 29 day, but it's really a 30 day, and the Rosh Chodesh on the 31st day. Some say, no, it wasn't Rosh Chodesh. A poor person came, knocked on the door, and she brought out bread for the poor. So she comes inside, and she sees her husband, like, his head like this, and he's picking up his head. Ooh, what's going on? Oive, Alape, Alampe, Armalei Kum, get up, hatzlacha, you killed my brother. Without even knowing that her brother died, she said, my brother died. There was an announcement, Rebbe Gamliel was nifter. Omar Lo, so her husband Rebbe Eliezer tells his wife, how did you know he's going to die? You think I'm just, you married Yichus over here. I come from a family of Nasiim. I come from David HaMelech, I come from. And I realized before that this goes together. That the gates of those who are hurt, like you, my husband Rebbe Eliezer, you're hurt from what Chacham did to you, they are not locked. And when you daven with tears, says Rashi, because the tears are there, then Hashem listens. How did she know? From David HaMelech, because we had in Amud Aleph the story with David HaMelech. That's my little pshat. I think that's what she meant. David HaMelech said on Amud Aleph that I'm hurt. And he brought a raya. The Gemara brings a raya, Kidnovations LLC, that Shari No from David HaMelech. You see that it works, that the tears of David HaMelech actually worked. Torah Hamanas Hager, if you do Aino as Dvarim to Ger, you say something not nice to him, over b'shlosh lavim. You're over on 3 lavim. And if you put pressure on him to pay back a loan, says Rashi, in Chumash says, you steal from him, but over here we're talking about putting pressure for a loan, over b'shnayim. You're over only on 2. Ask the Gemara, why you're over on 2, you should be over on 3. When you hurt his feelings, this is 3. The ger leisoin is 1. V'chi yogrit chol ger v'artzchem leisoin is 2. But listen, you should start with 3. The ger b'chlal misa. You're right, it's talking about a regular Jew, but a ger is already a regular Jew, so this is 3. Loichatzainami is when you put pressure on him, they should pay a loan, so they should see if he's 3. V'loisichatzain 1. The ger loisichatz 2. V'loisichatzain, which is talking to all Klal Yisroel, the ger b'chlalu. You're right. Whether you say not nice things to him or you pressure him to pay back a loan, you're over on 3. Tanya Rebbe Eliezer Torah. 36 different places in the Torah warns you not to bother again. And some say 46. Why 36? So open up a Bar Ilan and do a search, Ger, how many times it comes up, and you'll see 36 to 26 or 46. Says the last places on the Amud, there are places in the Torah that doesn't say don't bother a ger, but it talks about a ger, and that's also part of the 46. Why so many places? Because a ger is very sensitive. He wants to keep on going back to being a goy, and by you insulting him, you're pushing him off the derech, so to speak. There's a guy that married, I'm sure you all know a story or two, but I know somebody in Chicago who married a woman who was very close to my wife, and he was a ger, and then one day he decided to go back to where he was. That's it. I don't know if somebody said something nice to him in shul, but the point is that it happens, that somebody becomes a ger. We had this crazy message just recently. The guy that was, he sent his kids to Cheder and Yerushalayim, remember that whole story? Oh, no. I'm talking about there's a guy in Satmar, just this past year, the guy in Satmar, he was a ger, and he wrote a whole book. He went back to being a guy. He says, I don't hate Jews. People thought, oh, people giving him money, and he got married. No, the whole ma'isa with him. It happens that a guy becomes a ger and goes back. You don't want to push him off. You push him off because he's already a Jew, and he's going to be over all the Yisurim. There's no going back. Don't tell a ger, oh, you're a ger. You're also a ger. We're all ger. We're talking about here, Pesach. We read this on Chalamayit. Pesach. We remind ourselves, we were gerim. We didn't belong in Mitzrayim. So don't tell him what you have. When you have something wrong with you, don't say that fault to your friend. That's what people say. If somebody they hung somebody in his family, so don't talk about it. So don't use that lashon when you tell the slave, "Hey, hang the fish." The word hanging doesn't fly anymore in this family because there's someone's hung. So Mela, don't say the word gerim when you yourself are a ger. Rabboisai, a good Moed, a good Yontev, a good Shabbos, a good day. We'll see you Bezer Hashem, Motzei, Shabbos.